I remember watching a play, all women play, about early experiences and sexual abuse, and the author used this beautiful expression, the poisonous pleasure. That's such a compressed expression of conflict. If only it had been an all bad experience, we could put it in this bucket and be done with it. But life's complicated.
Hi, and welcome back to Reclamation Radio. I am Dr. Kelly Brogan, and today, back by popular demand, is Rupani, who is one of the more provocative and outspoken and audacious teachers on man-woman relating, and specifically BDSM, that I've encountered. And of course, that's why I love to chitty-chat with him. This is probably his third appearance on the show. And I asked him back today to talk specifically about what is referred to in the conscious kink and BDSM community as scene design. And my thinking is not that you're going to take these instructions back to the bedroom necessarily, but that you may develop a more nuanced and in-depth appreciation of the intersection between trauma, pleasure, and the potential for healing that lies in the real life adult consenting dyad. So we talk about how you can go straight to the scene of the crime with regard to your trauma-based experiences, whether that's related to jealousy or infidelity or body shame, or even experiences of incest and sexual abuse. And you can bring a yes to the experience that your body is holding of a no. And why this is transformational, and how you can literally set up these dynamics with your partner should you choose to explore the erotic reclamation of energy from the spaces of trauma that your body is holding with all of its wisdom. So I hope that this is expansive and potentially even pushes the envelope a little bit of your comfort in these highly taboo areas. Hi, everyone. I am back with one of my favorite exploratory partners, and we are here to have a conversation that I initiated because, as somebody new to BDSM culture, and just very curious, very lit up about what is possible in these realms, of course, with my background in psychiatry and my, over a decade of working with women in the specific art form of transmuting victim stories, victim consciousness. I was curious and asked, behind the scenes, I said, where can I learn about more scene design and examples? I'm somebody who learns very much from example and sort of imaginal imprints. I like to know what's possible, and that expands, my permission field. So I said, how can I learn about what are some examples of the way that people create scenes, design scenes for specific traumas? And, I'm not talking clinically, obviously, I'm just talking creatively. And in the world that I've entered, through your work, the Dom would be, chiefly responsible for attuning to a specific sub's, so many dimensions of her being, her system, her story, et cetera. And this is more like caricatures, right? This is more, almost cartoon level, and you're down for it. So I'm excited. And there's about 10 different scenarios that I would like to lay out.
I want to ask, what do you mean by it's caricature or cartoon level?
Meaning there's so much nuance that could be brought to bear with any given person's story, right? Any given person's history of experience. And so, when we start out and I say, which I will, what about a woman whose primary story is, my dad didn't care about me, he neglected me, he had more important priorities than me. Okay, that woman has an entire legacy that underpins that story, right? Probably her whole mother line has been carrying that story. Her story may be that, but her body may be reflecting something different that he might tune into, you might tune into. So I know there's so much nuance, and that's why this is meant to be like a 101, right? Like a 101, sort of like broad strokes and generalizations that I know would not necessarily apply in the more specific application for a given set of partners.
I hear what you're saying, and I'm not sure that distinction's real for me, but let's start our conversation and see where it goes.
Cool. That's even better. Because I thought you might say, listen, like it depends. Right? It depends on the person.
Actually, I don't think it depends at all, but ask me a question and we'll get into it. I think it's actually the answer might be simpler than you're
I
imagining.
love it. That's like exactly what I want to hear. Of course. So I sort of put two buckets into my notes. Daddy-daughter stuff, because even in my training, which was actually Freudian and my later interest in Jungian psychology, the dynamic between a daughter and her father, as you well know, is very specific, right? Relative to the dynamic between a mother and her son. And you and I have even discussed how the erotic dynamic that begins in a little girl's life, right? Look at me, daddy, look at my energy, look at my radiance, persists and informs pretty much exactly what she wants in her adult partnership from a man. And of course, there is an initiation required for most young boys who seek the approval, perhaps, and love of their mothers. But the initiation seems to, in many ways, extinguish the erotic energy, if it ever existed. I don't know, you tell me. For a little boy, when he becomes a man, he does not want what he wanted from his mommy, from his woman. So that's why I wanted to focus a lot on daddy-daughter issues. I have several of them. And then on partner issues, like partner-specific stuff that might come up in, man-woman relationship. So let's start with the first one. So the first one is, as I mentioned, and this actually draws from a consult that I just did with a woman who has the primary story that her father didn't care about her, didn't like her, he neglected her, he had other priorities in his life, his work, he was very stressed out, and his heart was closed to her. She felt like a burden to him. And that is something that she walks around the earth, really carrying, in her own heart and probably attracting in partners. So that would be the first one. I'd be curious, like how would that look?
Let me ask you, you said you have 10 scenarios. Are all of these parent-child scenarios?
7 of them are I would say daddy-daughter, but father-daughter. And then 3 of them are the most common issues for, I would say, like alchemy in partnership, because, these things come up and they could become conflicts that you talk about in couples therapy, or you could just, alchemize them in an afternoon, with this kind of work, I'm thinking.
So this is a very wonderful topic. This is a very rich topic. Parent-child scenes, daddy, little girl. It's a very rich area of investigation in BDSM scene play. I think I have seen truly startling, amazing results and catharsis happen within the space of a single scene for people. And this is slightly advanced play. It's psychological play. It certainly is role playing, but actually the logic of it is very, very much the same. So actually it may have the same generic answer for all 7 of your scenarios. So let me first give you that outline, and then we can see what the specific nuances might be between the different scenarios. So within the Dom-Sub dynamic, the purpose of a parent-child scene is to take the submissive into a particular locale of their consciousness or their past. It's up to the submissive where they want to go. So you just gave one. Repeat it for us one more time. What is the first scenario? Your submissive wants to deal with what?
Feeling like she was a burden to her father who neglected her.
Logic of every scene is exactly the same. Revisit the scene of the crime. Reenact the scene of the crime. Reenact the moment that created these narratives, these beliefs about ourselves. One of the general themes that seems to be underneath all this trauma, if you want to use that word, I'm hesitant always to use the word because it is so widespread today, is that essentially these are moments where we formulate stories regarding our worthiness of love. So one woman may say, my father was never around. Another woman may say, my father ignored me. Third woman may say, my father would get angry and withdraw. fourth woman would say my father drank too much and ignored me. As children, essentially what we interpret all of that as somehow I did something and as a result, I didn't get the love, and deservedly so. We assume the blame. Somehow in our child logic, we're like, even if my father drank too much and didn't love me, was I responsible for that somehow? So that's like part of our wound. What rendered me unlovable? What did I do that I did not get the love I wanted? What's at the source of it? It usually ends up being an esteem issue, not just that somebody else did something to me. Somebody else did something to me, but when it's a parent, we usually think we deserved it because we have a very hard time making our parent wrong. Parent is right, but if the parent is right, I must be wrong because the interaction between me and my parent is painful. So somebody has to be at fault, and children often think I must be the one at fault. Actually, that's a very narcissistic worldview. But children are narcissistic in a very oblivious and innocent way because they think they are the source of, they are the causality of what's happening around them. That if mommy is loving me, it's because I am doing something. And if mommy is ignoring me, it's because I am doing something. If mommy is angry, it's because I am doing something. Right? We think we are gods and we are causing everything to happen, including the bad. And around it, we build our wounding and our self-identity. Like, I am not lovable. The kind of person I am, my mother didn't love me. Certainly my wife is not going to love me. So on and so forth. And the opportunity in BDSM scene is simply to recreate those moments, to revisit deliberately in scene play and role play in the theater of BDSM, knowing you are recreating it, knowing that your Dom is not your father, and simply revisiting those energies and examining them, right? And that's step one. Basically, tell me what the tender spot is, and let's see if we can recreate it in scene play. So what is the Dom's job? The Dom's job is simply to take the submissive script and see if they can take them back there. They are kind of the director and the co-actor of the submissive's life story. That's the Dom skill in parent-child play. And once you get to that locale, you basically have two options. One is the Dom can recreate the negative parental energy. So you could tell your Dom, play my father, take me there, and then ignore me, or push me away, or tell me I'm being annoying, or that you're busy with work, so I get to re-experience the pain. Or truly, just flip it. In scene play, have your Dom give you the paternal love that you did not get as a child. And within a scene, you can do both, right? So if your story is my father ignored me, my father did not love me, my father did not find me interesting, my father preferred to work and be with his friends and play golf rather than be with his daughter. Your Dom can take you there. Your Dom can play the part. Your Dom can say, sweetie, I don't have time for you. I'm going to play golf now. It's all theater. Or you can flip the story and he can pretend to put on his golf clubs and come sit by his daughter and read her a story. It really is not more sophisticated or complicated than that. We are really revisiting a child's logic, a child's very tender logic. And somehow in revisiting it and going into it head on, healing tends to happen. As adults, it's like we are bringing our adult is standing in front of our child archetype in scene play. And then the adult will say, well, my dad probably did the best he could. And even that time I remember he like pushed me aside and went to play golf. He probably really needed to get away that day. And it wasn't about that he didn't love me. We get this understanding. We see the humanity of it. And the stories and the wounding, they stop being so self-important. The narcissism comes out of it like it was all about me. It wasn't all about you. Your father was a human being. Maybe he was having a bad day. Maybe your father was an alcoholic. And can you forgive that? Maybe that day he was drunk. He had drunk a little too much. You have had days when you've drunk too much. People come up with this thing like, hey, I've had bad days, right? Can I forgive my father for being a human being? That memory I'm still carrying from 30 years ago when it was clear he was drunk and uncaring. And it really is about revisiting the scene of the crime. It's a bit of psychodrama. It's a bit of scene play. You tell your Dom what your story is. You tell your Dom the memory which you've been ruminating over for 30 years. And your Dom says, all right, let's recreate it. Let's go there. Let's see if we can find some element of release. That's the basic logic of scene play.
And you talked about how sometimes you can represent both, sort of the unlived fantasy and also the core experience. How does that transition look, right? If you're going to include them both, because I've seen this and it seems very artful, in certain depictions to move from, sort of rendering the imagined script of rejection, let's say, and then somehow taking this up into the fantasy realm of the unlived experience. Like, how does that transition happen usually?
You can literally design it as a theater play between dom and sub. You can orchestrate it. You can say, for the first 10 minutes, give me your withholding energy, your ignoring energy, you don't have time for me energy. And then let's just switch and come over and be sweet and hold me and say, I'm sorry, I was being dismissive. Doesn't mean I don't love you. I actually like spending time with you. Let's spend some time together. Really. And it may seem that it is in a way all fabricated, in a way it is theater, but emotions that come up and the healing that happens is extremely real. And it's very moving to watch, right? One of my favorite examples to give about parent-child play I've seen is, it doesn't have to be always about the negative things. One woman who's in our community and classes said, one of her fondest memories of her father was when he would read to her. Her father loved books. Her father would give her books, and then her father would also read to her. It was one of the main ways she remembers having her father's attention and connecting with her father, because her father wanted to encourage her to read. And then he would spend a lot of time sitting with her, reading to her. And then she's like, it's what I miss the most, because I had his attention. We were together. It was only the two of us. It was the best time. It was quality father-daughter moments. And so she designed a scene where her dom played her father and he just read to her for 20 minutes. And she was in tears. It was like, I got my father back for 20 minutes, right? So I wish we had, I have a whole very long module on parent-child scene play. And I have a few sections here on what are the few categories of incompletions between parent and child. If you want, I can quickly go through those, and that'll give you an idea. I tell my students to kind of go through these questions and see which ones stick out for them, which categories. And then whatever sticks out for you, whatever evokes emotion, that's the nugget you should bring into scene play to examine and deal with, right? And it's in a way a big category because, of course, our childhood is a big category and our relationships are that complex, but it is not infinitely complex, truly. I find it's a handful of categories in which incompletion happens, or some negative beliefs gets formed around, am I lovable? What are the conditions for me being loved by my parent?
I would love that. I mean, I'm sure I probably, would have touched on them and they're splintered around, but I think your categories are perfect.
So the module starts off saying, obviously, we all have a child archetype, needless to say, but this needs to be pointed out that the child, when I work with archetypes, obviously the child archetypes is inside all of us, all through our life. So in a way, the child archetype in us is never completely gone and ejected. It's part of us. So if you're 70 years old, there's still the child in you that was 4 years old, 5 years old, 10 years old. And that child archetype can be revisited. It's always sitting inside of us. It's never gone. That's the first thing to acknowledge, that we all have a child archetype in us. And it is safe to say that nobody's childhood archetype, the child archetype, was kept absolutely complete. Everybody's child archetype has something incomplete in it, right? And that it's a matter of finding, well, in my childhood, what was incomplete, right? So I'll read you the questions around examining. So these are the questions to ask your child archetype. Where is your child most incomplete? Where was your childhood most severely interrupted? What is the biggest trauma of your childhood? What beliefs about yourself did your child acquire without being able to comprehend the true complexity of it? Because children form beliefs very quickly and rapidly, and they're interpreted through a child's lens. And what were those beliefs? What loss did your child experience? How was love rewarded or withheld from your child? Very big topic. What made your child feel safe? What made your child feel they were a cherished part of the world? What made your child feel fearful, terrified, abandoned, lonely, discarded? When did your child feel he or she was preferred? Very big category as children. And when did your child feel he or she was not preferred or wanted? That in itself is enough. I'm sure everybody can tick off at least a few points like, ooh, I have some tension there. And that's only one category of questions, right? So the design of a parent-child play, one of the approaches can be simply completing these areas of kind of, again, trauma, if you want to call it, incompletions. And there are other categories, but let me know if that makes sense, if that resonates.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I think the preferred one, because I think many of us experience very volatile. In psychology, it's intermittent reinforcement, right? So it's the most powerful way to program an individual is to give them something and then unpredictably take it away at intervals.
It is very painful. It is even painful as adults. If you have partners who have mood swings, who tend to withdraw, it can be extremely painful. And you can almost feel yourself regressing to an infantile stage and those energies because you're like, what do I need to do to keep your love consistent? It's a really painful thing to take on. Psychologists will say, don't do that to yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
And oftentimes, whether some certain personality patterns, whether they're doing it consciously or unconsciously, that's how they control and manipulate, right? People with NPD will do intermittent reinforcement. And when they love you, it'll be like the sun came up and then they will take it away and you're like a junkie on the withdrawal. You're like, what happened to all the love I had yesterday, right? And sometimes this happens with parents, not because they are being evil or they're being tortured. It may be as simple as the mother suffered from depression. It may be that the father traveled for work or he worked long hours. And it ends up being an intermittent reinforcement. When the father is there, the sun is up, and then you don't see him for 3 weeks.
There are a couple of follow-ups I want to ask about this. One is, I'm just thinking of a friend of mine who tracks a lot of her sort of conflicted relationship, let's say, to her own sexuality back to one incident where her dad was leaving, I think, and she was very, very little, maybe 6, and she winked at him. And he shamed her for that and said, that's not appropriate. You can't do that with your father. And I'm sure many girls had that experience of, sort of flirting, playing with their dad and then being admonished for it. How would that sort of translate? Would it be a sort of exact reenactment of that kind of a scene and then some sort of transition into, a play of the desire sort of being acted out, the desire that the little girl maybe even had on some level for, the father? When I was in your retreat container, Lori, shared this super impactful that I spoke to her about on the podcast experience that she had, playing out with a friend in a scene of really taking the unlived desire that she had as a little girl for her father to desire her erotically into enactment, right? Would it be the fulfillment? Would it look like that? Or what do you think?
Again, I think the logic is not infinitely complex. It'll go in one of two directions. Either you enact it and your father reacts exactly the same way, shames you, so you can simply go into it and feel that. Or you can flip the script and go in the opposite direction. Wherever you think the catharsis may be for you, wherever you think the healing may be for you, play it out both ways. I think when we do this as adults, I don't think we are so fragile. We can literally run the script both ways and see which one has greater impact on us. And sometimes you may have to do it both ways. And people are crazy enough in BDSM play that sometimes they go all out. I have seen people do parent-child play. This was the day you missed in Tulum. So the day you missed, let me tell you a couple of stories of what went on because we did parent-child play. First of all, I matched people with tarot cards. I did not select them. And I didn't even select by gender. I'm like, if 2 men end up together, it's perfect. 2 women, because this is not gender play. And you don't need to play the parent of only your gender. Women can play fathers, men can play mothers. I really find it's amazing the magic of this container. When I have my all women class, my priestess training, They do father-daughter play, women to women, and it's brilliant every time. I'll give you one example. This is so insane. We had two women who got paired up. They were both physically disciplined by their fathers. They were both belted by their fathers. By the way, they were both Eastern European. They were both belted by their fathers. They both had sisters, younger sisters. One would step in to take the beating for the younger sister. One was glad that she could take the beatings and her little sister was not touched. The other one hated the little sister, that she got the beatings, but the little sister never got any. They got paired with each other. I don't know how, because we didn't know anything about this. They both did a scene where they belted the crap out of each other. They went all in. Lori and I are looking at the scene like, what the hell are those two women doing? Because we don't know what their scenarios are. They haven't told us. We're going to find out later what they're doing. And they really went into the scene all the way. And they played the psychodrama all the way. They had told each other's narratives all the way. They got to tell the father, yeah, hit me, but leave my sister alone. And the other one's like, hate you for doing me. Why don't you go? She's your favorite. You never touch her. They got to play out all the withholds, right? Whatever the resentments were, you get to say them now, and you know this particular thing is just theater. This is a fellow girl who's doing it to you. It's not your father. But the release happens. The release is just as real because all those stuck energies, you get to speak it. And they went all the way because they wanted the physicality. They wanted the pain. They wanted to revisit those somatic memories. It was very real for them, right? It's because once you put the body in the same somatic states, you're like right back there, right? I don't even know. They may even have been speaking to each other in their common language. I think they may have been in the same country, Eastern European country. So you see this crazy theater happening, and all within the course of an hour, two-way scene, they come out and it's like, that was like 15 years of therapy, right? It can be really beautiful when it works. So which way is the release going to happen? Who the hell knows? Was the recreating the belting, was the part that created the catharsis? Was being able to yell at your father this time and before you never could? Was that part of the catharsis? Was speaking out your resentment about sibling preference the point of catharsis? Was the aftercare where your dom now held you and actually gave you the containment post beating, which you never got as a child? Now, was that the crucial healing part? Because it's a very important piece. Usually when people get hit or punished, they're left afterwards, most of the time. And our scene, we're like, no, this much we require of the doms, that don't leave your submissive hanging, contain them, give them aftercare, bring them back. Don't let them self-soothe, because that was part of the trauma. This time, the dom is going to soothe the submissive. Don't leave the submissive to self-soothe as we did when we were thrown on our own energies as young people, because that's part of the energy. There's nobody here afterwards. Was that the part that actually undoes, loosens up the trauma and the memory? I think all of it, and it's hard to measure it, right? But this is the magic of scene play, that you play all this out and people come out and say, that's incredible. I feel so much release. So much of the story is gone. So much of the charge is gone. Now I can just look at like, yeah, that happened to me. That's part of my biography now. And stories like that are truly not uncommon in plays like that. It really is amazing how impactful it is. This is why I'm really a huge advocate of scene play. I think it's magical. I think theater is magical. And we participate in the theater of it. We are the actors and the participants, right? And our life stories, our most chargiest parts of our biography are the script we are playing out.
Right. Because there's a memory, there's an experience, and then there's the narrative that persists, really generating the same emotional valence our entire life.
And the narrative always generally is about one's self-worth. All of it, right? The one girl feels proud she took the beatings for her sister. That's an element of pride in her. So now, is her memory of the beatings positive or negative? This is where sex gets kinky. Because that girl may tell her man, spank me, punish me. And he'll be like, what the hell are you getting out of it? What she may be getting out of it is a sense of accomplishment, strength, pride. character. Nobody knows that except her because she took the beatings for the sister. For the other girl, it's opposite, right? Whatever it is, this is how we kind of formulate our self-concepts and self-beliefs around these little things.
Yes. And it's also the complexity, right? In sexual abuse and molestation and actual frank incest is that there is pleasure for most.
It's a very controversial topic. This topic keeps coming up. I don't know. I've talked about this topic 3 times in the last 3 weeks with different people. That there are positive elements to dark experiences and they really screw us up.
It's that confusion that actually is the seed of the trauma. Yeah.
It's the confusion when women say the body responded. And I remember watching a play, All Women Play, about early experiences and sexual abuse. And the author used this beautiful expression, the poisonous pleasure. Stayed with me. That's such a compressed expression of conflict, right? If only it had been an all bad experience, we could put it in this bucket and be done with it. But life's complicated. And love, generally with parental experiences, we interpret it in some way to our lovability. It's really hard to separate ourselves from the experience and the event, and our worthiness somehow gets entangled in it.
I also, as somebody who's studied a lot of somatic experiencing, Peter Levine's work, am fascinated by the potential for this completion concept on the physical level, right? Because in that branch of, sort of trauma healing, there is this idea that there is, these are my words, but the unkicked kick or the unpunched punch, right? And that there are actual physical movements that in experiences of abuse, I would say chiefly, physical abuse, but anytime we experience our own powerlessness as children, there are movements that the body wanted to make, right? We wanted to push him off. We wanted to, kick our mom when we were mad and we couldn't or didn't or tried and it was ineffective. And so to go back to those moments and, like you depicted in that one scene, scream the thing that wanted to be said and all of the motions that come with it, right? Our bodies animate in those moments. And that completion is a very well-established means of closing a trauma loop that could never occur in talk therapy, right? There's no hope.
It can't occur in talk therapy. And I would say it can't even occur if you try to carry out those movements minus the emotional charge underneath it. You can't do it separate from the emotion and even separate from the scenario. You really need the full theater of it a little bit. You really need to put the body back in the place and then play with the drama and the theater of it. And it does something afterwards. I think it does create completion oftentimes for people. Yeah.
So I designed my first live retreat, Audacious Embodiment, as a feminine reclamation boot camp and the ultimate pattern disrupt of all of the ways we close down, shut off, and choose survival unto death instead of vitality in our lives as women. So I called in an all-star cast to take the stage and expand the permission field of what we get to be as women, who we are allowed to be, and to guide you through shadow work with yours truly, Osho dynamic meditation, family constellation, ancestral song, hair whips and sensual hip grinding routines, creating art out of your longing, twerk, and perhaps the climax, pun intended, of the event, where in the able hands of a dominatrix, I gave a surprise to me demo on how spanking can be used to alchemize your inner tyrant's voice into love, celebration, and acceptance. It was game-changing, not only for me, but for everyone who was able to witness this. And it is now recorded and available for you to partake in. So, and one of the attendees said, I left feeling so much more attuned and open to my emotions, and I feel this connection to my intuition and my body's sensations that I didn't even realize was there. And another said, this past weekend, she opened the door, invited me in, and gave me permission to open my heart, move my body and dance, heal my mother wound, say no, say yes, use my voice, honor, respect, and admire men, honor my own courage, meet my dominance and submission, meet my edge, and go past it. I know that these recordings will translate what occurred that weekend. And I cannot wait to hear what gets audaciously ignited within you. So check them out. They're available on my shop page and at the link in show notes. There are two scenarios. This is so profound. I find this an essential part of the conversation that psychiatry is certainly not depicting kink as a paraphilia in the DSM-5. There's definitely an intention to keep this out of the realm of therapeutics at best and malign it and stigmatize it at worst. I am curious what you think about two scenarios that I see come up a lot in men-woman dynamics, in marriages, in partnerships that I have observed and experienced actually become like a nidus of ongoing conflict that could be alchemized in this setting, I think very creatively, although I don't necessarily know what that would look like. One is jealousy. Right. One is jealousy. And specifically, I'm speaking to women here. So specifically women who find themselves threatened by this idea of her man having a wandering eye or having certain dynamics with women, whether they're overtly sexual or otherwise. That could become such a painful story, for that couple. And I know that you have experience creating scenes where that could be visited and, alchemized. And the other is body shame. I think specifically, and I worked on this, we worked on this with women this weekend. Breasts is like a big one, right? So especially women in my demographic who've had a couple kids and, haven't opted for, let's say, surgical optimization, if you will, breast shame, like my breasts are saggy, my nipples aren't pretty anymore. But then there's all sorts of shame held in all sorts of parts of the body, right? Whether it's legs or ass or belly. I think belly is probably another big one. And what are some of the ways that can be worked with a trusted partner in BDSM play?
Truly, the logic again is the same. BDSM people, in a way, they believe in turning into the fire because avoidance doesn't really work. When something's really bothering you, avoiding it doesn't work. So let's take the first scenario of jealousy. Again, this is such a common topic. I've orchestrated scenes around this for many a couple. It's a very common request. I would say jealousy is essentially born of exclusion. Jealousy is essentially about abandonment. Jealousy is about not being preferred, not being the first chosen one. Somebody else is going to be chosen over me. And that scenario can be again played out in both directions in scene play very effectively. Let's say it's the woman who's dealing with her jealousy. She wants to deal with it. I can bring in a female practitioner because you need 3 to exclude. You need at least 3 to leave one person out. The practitioner can be in engagement with her man, with her husband. You can literally tell her, go stand in the corner and watch, feel what you're feeling, burn in it. What are the thoughts that are coming up for you? If you want that ride, and examine how true those statements are. And even if those statements are true, so what? But this is advanced play. You have to have enough of your psyche intact and you have to want to do this, right? Is he enjoying her? He is. She actually is younger than you. She actually is prettier than you. He actually may leave you for her. Happens all the time. Happens all the time. People cheat on their partners all the time. People leave. Again, the logic is the same, is turn into the fear, and instead of the monsters being inside your head, put them in front of your physical eyes. And then what can you do? Great, because if you understand that jealousy essentially is born of exclusion, at some point, I'll bring the wife over and says, come here. And I'll put them in a threesome. I'll have the man handle both of them. I'll have the practitioner pour her love and eros on the woman till she does not feel excluded. Now she's having fun. Now she's being loved. Now she's in a cuddle puddle. Now she is in arousal with her man and this beautiful woman. She does not feel discarded. She does not feel alone. She feel her pleasure and her acceptance has doubled. I'm like, okay, enough of that. Go back in the corner and then come back. And we play this game sometimes. Play both sides of it. And I think if you play it enough times, you kind of stop being terrorized by your own thoughts. And then you see your agency in it, right? And I've seen true compersion being generated from this, which is like, you know what? All of it is true and all of it is fine and all of it is possible. Yeah, there are a gazillion women younger and more beautiful than me at this point. Yes, my man could leave me for one of them. Yes, all of those horrors can come true. And yet, I know my man loves me. I don't think he's going anywhere. I don't think he's trying to hurt me, even when he looks at other women or he desires other women. Look at that woman. I desire her. She's goddamn hot. Of course, he would desire. All the reality just comes up instead of the monsters in the head. And like now, I have agency on like what exactly do I want to create with my husband? Do I want to sit in a corner and sulk and draw him away? Or do I invite women like this over and have fun with them once a week? It's your life to live. Truly, I've seen people make that shift and they're like, where is the greater agency? Where is the artistry of eros and relationship? And sulking and drawing people away because of your fears are actually creating the life that you want. Because what's to stop you? What's to stop a woman and a man in their 60s and 70s hiring practitioners in their 20s to come by once a week and have fun with them? Nothing. Enjoy your life. Create whatever the hell you want.
This inclusive comportment, I think, is fascinating because I hadn't really thought about the abandonment perspective. Because there are some teachers who would say, you know, look at who it is that your man has his what turns him on other than you, right? And embody that energy. That if you want to retain the fidelity of your man's, focus and attention, then you have to hold all of the feminine energies and flavors from the dark to the light. And there's almost like a striving to become something and embody something that is not organic to you, which could be wonderful, right? It could be expansive, that could be fun. But what you're suggesting is be your damn self and find ways to resolve what is fundamentally, potentially only threatening when you are projecting your childhood wounds onto it.
This may sound like I'm making light of the subject, but it truly is as simple as whatever. The wife's vegetarian and she tells the husband, you know what, go with your guys and go eat a steak. I don't need to come with you. You can truly, I think our appetites and desires are localized oftentimes, and we can be generous to each other and fulfill them. And let me tell you, one of the most common ways this has come my way, which may be counterintuitive to many people. And this often comes from couples who have been married for a while, men who usually are quite sophisticated and worldly. They'll be like, you know what, you're a brilliant dom. I don't have time to become a brilliant dom. I'm okay with paying you money to handle my wife once a week or once a month. Have a great time. Not a problem. They can lay their boundaries. I have my own boundaries. They'll be like, no penetration. I'm like, not doing that anywhere. They're like, please show her a great time. Send me the bill. It's not a problem. And maybe one session with a dom a week is all that the wife needs to feel delighted. Instead of trying to convert a very high-powered man who's working 80 hours a week to come get dom training.
Right, into a professional, right?
And he's like, I don't have time for it. I don't have a particular appetite for this. But if this is what my woman wants, just as I'm happy to send her for a spa weekend, yeah, she has a dom she visits once a week or once every 2 weeks. Not a problem for me. Women probably make similar accommodations for their men. I don't know. I don't want to know what you're doing in Vegas. Just, don't bring anything home and we're good. I think this is what great adult relationships look like, actually. Can we nourish each other? Can we be kind to each other? I'm a big fan of Esther Perel, and one of the central points Esther Perel makes over and over is we are living in these neurotic times where we have this insistence that one person fulfill all our needs. And we are failing miserably with this premise. Because we're living in a world where our desires are ever expanding. We want more and more things. More and more things are being shown to us to whet our appetites. Never before have our appetites been stimulated like in the current day. We are being sold to want things. And then in relationship and sexuality and eros, we are deciding that one person now needs to fulfill the entire spectrum of our desires. It's unrealistic, right? And how can we be kind to each other, find a way to live rich lives without making unrealistic expectations on our partners?
As distinguished from something that we've spoken about in previous conversations, as distinguished from the 7 chakra marriage, right? Or this idea that you bring all of yourself on all of these activated points to the relationship. It does not mean that you are all of the things necessarily to that person.
Yeah, and I think there are certain things on that list which I think are integral to partnership, right? For the primary one I talk about is if the woman does not respect this particular man, isn't going to be any real partnership. But eros actually is not one of the things. People can have spectacular partnerships, really deep partnerships that last for decades. And having the perfectly fulfilling erotic connection with each other is not the deal maker or the deal breaker for people, oftentimes. So create the life you want, create the life that works for both of you together in that area.
Huge permission field in this. Okay, so what about the final topic I brought up, which is how to work with body shame? Yeah,
Body shaming is such a common topic in BDSM scene. I have a class for women training them to be dominatresses, and one of the very common requests they get is for cock shaming. Men are so insecure about their cock sizes. Men are really believing the idea that just as women feel, oh, I'm aging, there are younger women, he's going to leave me. Men often feel, oh, you're going to find a bigger, sweeter, happier cock than me. It's one of the core fears. And so whether that's true or not is irrelevant. Just as women's body insecurities to most men are like, you're beautiful, I don't know what you're being so neurotic about. Or women, if it's women's issue, they're like, but I'm insecure. It's the internal narrative I'm carrying. And those internal narratives can be brought up in humiliation play. And really the logic, once again, is the same, turn into the fire, essentially. So you're worried. What are you worried about? Cock is too small. No woman's going to love me for this. I can't satisfy a woman. My woman's going to leave me. And then there's a range. It's a range of humiliation scenes men set up. Everything from simply being stripped down and being verbally abused by a dominatrix, all the way up to hiring a man with a humongous cock to come fuck your woman in front of you and simply burn in that and go through that humiliation. Because human beings are insane. And my love, those scenarios are more common than you would think. I'm not kidding. Men hiring other men, paying them to come take their wives in front of them with their huge members is not an uncommon scenario of play and scene play. And again, all kinds of energies are wrapped into this. The man maybe wants to go into his humiliation. He wants to externalize his internal fears and realize the world hasn't fallen apart. At another level, you know what? If my woman actually is a size queen and she wants this, I'm going to give it to her. It's in a way of taking charge of the situation instead of being victim to it and kind of dealing with all these various areas of the psyche.
I was interviewed by Aubrey Marcus, and so this is a public story. And he shared an experience that he had of he and his wife hiring a female dominatrix and, working on sort of like erectile performance pressure. I don't know, that's my phrase for it. And the way that many men tie their sense of worth to the hardness of their cock. And, I spoke on the podcast with River Roaring about boner shame and how, from early in life, boys are taught this thing should never move ever, or you'll be humiliated irreparably. But then when you get into the bedroom, you should have like a rock hard cock and know exactly how long to keep it that way. And so, he experienced with this dominatrix this validation, I would say, and praise and even like erotic mastery without, having that level of performance at play. And so I could see there's so many different avenues to
Very much. Here also you can go in two directions. So the flip side of humiliation play is cherishment play.
Right. Worshipping.
Yeah. So you talked about a woman. So at one level, you could bring the woman in and actually humiliate her and say, look how old you're getting, blah, blah, blah. And then you can flip the script and actually admire her and tell her how beautiful she is and do it genuinely and take that in too. Because after the humiliation play, we are kind of ripped open. And that's actually a great time to pour in some cherishment. And you can do that with women. You can do that with a man. You can rip a man open saying, look at your pathetic little cock. And then you can turn that around and say, do you have any fucking idea what an amazing man you are? Do you have any idea how desirable you are? Do you have any idea what an impression you make on women and how many women want you? And let all of that get in. And it's beautiful. It's really magnificent.
Yes, one of my
I've done that to people. I've seen it done and I teach it to people. And it is extraordinary. People, both sides will be crying by the end. Both sides, because that these places are so tender in us. We are so afraid in these tender places, right? That we want to go into our fears. And then when we receive the acknowledgement, it's like we basically turn liquid because we've been carrying the fears and the tenderness in those parts for so long. And we don't get to hear that cherishment either because, we don't hear that oftentimes from our partners. So the scene play has this power to kind of deliver these very concentrated medicines. Humiliation is a very concentrated medicine. And then at the other end of it, gives somebody very concentrated cherishment and appreciation and reflection on how brilliant they are. Can be really amazing, beautiful to watch.
And then you could even throw in punishment for self-abuse, right? Like punishment for self-criticism.
Yes, you can punish them for not loving themselves more, which is a great head fuck. One of the favorite head fucks is to actually punish people for diminishing their brilliance instead of punishing them for. You can punish to lessen the darkness or to increase the brightness, both of them. So if you know there are areas where you're not showing up, that's the obvious area of punishment. But you can also punish people like Kimmy did to you for, do you let yourself feel how amazing you are in this world? Do you let yourself feel how much impact you're having? I'm going to turn you around and I'm going to have these women tell you in real time while I spank your stupid ass that you stop holding yourself back. And I saw your face. Those are real emotions.
Yeah.
You get ripped open in those moments. It's really important.
Absolutely. And that's also the magic, as you well know, of impact play is that for many of us who have a tendency to dissociate, in these moments of peak emotional expansion, it keeps you here. It keeps you here, to have that intense sensation during these emotional alchemical experiences.
It can keep you there. It is a form of anchoring, and it can be a true form of punishment. Like, stop doing this shit. Stop cutting yourself down like this, right? That could be the flip side of humiliating a guy for cock size. First, you humiliate him and then you beat the shit out of him like you gotta cut this shit out. What the fuck is wrong with you? Do you have any idea what a magnificent man you are? This is what you're obsessed about. Do better things with your time. It's a great form of head fucking. It's a very beautiful and generous field to hold for someone because ultimately you want their release and catharsis and expansion.
I remember the first introduction I had to this was through Kasia Urbaniak's work, who is a dominatrix and she talks about when she worked in this dungeon, she had this client who had perhaps an objectively small cock, right? And that she, shamed him for it, humiliated him for it, and then alchemized it by saying, you must know how to really please a woman then. Like, you must be a masterful lover if you're working with that and you know exactly what to do. And I was like, wow, this is high art. This is high art.
It is art and it's a very loving space ultimately to hold for someone.
Yes, compassionate.
And these are really painful places. All kinds of things can go into this. Cock size is one of them. I've had, the kind of the privilege of working couple of times with men who have been through prostate surgery and their nerves have been damaged and they can't get erections anymore. Not even with Viagra. And men are often devastated. And I have seen similar transformations happen to them to kind of flip the narrative. And if you can serve those people in that way, if you can kind of restore their brilliance and some kind of a positive outlook in some way to kind of drain that belief, like, I'm no longer a man, I'm no longer useful to women. Women can't possibly be interested in me. I can't possibly be of any use to women without an erection ever. Because these are the beliefs are what are killing people. They're not really objective. And it's beautiful, the changes that can happen when we go in there and we tinker with this in scene play.
I love this. This conversation feels to me like such an important contribution to the intention of unlocking the power of taboo. And of course, the way out is through, of course it is, right? You have to turn toward it if you want to visit with what is arrested in development. Oh my gosh, it's so profound.
It doesn't go away on its own, truly. Sits there for decades.
And so these were super helpful examples of that.
You bring 40, 50, 60-year-old people and they're still doing child play and they're still visiting something that happened when they were 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old. It's like our childhood archetype doesn't automatically disappear. Those wounds don't automatically heal. They run our lives.
I'm so grateful to you and this incredibly essential work you're doing in the world. And we'll make sure, that everybody has access to the incredible materials that you've developed that I just don't think exist elsewhere, to explore this and really ground it in theory and practice. And also, I just think the way that you write is so inspirational. Your book is one of my favorite contributions to this space. I mean, maybe actually my favorite, because there's so much poetry in this realm. There's so much metaphysical significance in these conversations. And I have really come to believe that this is one of the most important technologies for self-empowerment that exists out there, and it's being...
I feel very heartened that you are speaking of it this way, because it's hard to convince people that kink is not just for kinky people, that BDSM and the things we do are not just for people in leather pants and dungeons. So it's very hard to tell people this is a human, we are examining our humanity in these explorations, that this is not fringe. So it's wonderful to have more people kind of express that. More people need to hear it. Otherwise, the bulk of the people out there think, oh, those weirdos do those things. I'm like, I still don't own a pair of leather pants. Trust me, there is something in this realm for everybody. Who cannot use some kind of release in their child archetype.
Amen.
Right? To think that this is only for some weirdos on the fringe, I think it is very hard to disabuse this false impression from our culture, but we'll do our part.
We're doing it. Thank you.
My pleasure, love. Thank you for having me.